Well, everybody, Russ, the West Ham Network. Hope you are all safe and well. Happy Thursday. A grey and gloomy Thursday in central London, but not so grey and gloomy in Chicago. It's my type of town. West Ham 2, Everton 1 early this morning. As we always like to do with games, we like to sort of go back and look at them and pull out some sort of tidbits. And I think, to be honest, coming out of this game, obviously having won the game being one thing, which is always useful, there were, for me, a lot more positives than they were against Man United on Saturday. Maybe because I looked at it, I watched the first half live and then watched the second half when I'd had a sleep. Maybe I was more less sleep deprived. But I think there was definitely some positives. There was a lot of when the starting lineup very much was the quite a youthful lineup. The likes of Callum Casey were in there, Freddy Potts, Callum Marshall. And we're going to talk about a couple of them more specifically in a minute. But for me, the first half, I mean, actually, let's get into it because I'm going to end up repeating myself. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with Potts. I think from the first half was probably the pick of the bunch, from my opinion. You'll have other opinions. That's great. That's why we do what we do. I think we saw different facets of his game than we saw in his sort of cameo role last week. I think last week there was a lot of precision, a lot of passing. In terms of his minutes yesterday, there was definitely a bit more of that defensive crunch in him. Some good tackles, winning the ball back. I thought, he doesn't look out of place. And if ever we have to exemplify this sort of blueprint in terms of how we utilize academy players in terms of the loan deals, and he's obviously done League 2, League 1, League 1, Championship, and now in the Premier League. There's a steep learning curve, but there's a definite gradual increase in performance, and he's ready. He's ready for day one. He really is. Now, whether they take a punt on him is another thing. I thought, again, we're going to talk about the shape and stuff in a minute, but I thought Freddie, what I'd like to see in Sunday's game is a continuation. It seems to have, incrementals each game, and that's what you want to see. You don't want to see going backwards. You want to see improvements in, even if they're minute, as long as you're improving 5%. That's better than decreasing 5%. These incremental improvements will make things better. And I think, there's clearly a path where Freddie comes in that midfield. And I think that's to do with the shape. And again, we'll talk about that in a bit. There was some, our West Ham network WhatsApp group, there was some real contention about shape. And I think actually the first half was a lot better. We're going to talk about that as well. Let's talk about the defence. Now, for me, it's clear the defence that started against Man United, including the goalkeeper at the moment, unless we'll talk about that in a minute, is a defence that will be day one defence. I thought Mav did okay. I thought Kyle Walker-Peters had an okay game. Diouf was all right. I thought we looked defensively fragile more in the first half. The second half we looked stronger defensively. I thought Callum had a bit of a torrid time. I think he was quite bullied at times from the Everton forward line. And if anything, exemplifies my point why I think he should go out on loan. I've been saying that for a while now. People have been calling for him to start. He's not ready, and actually I think you can have a detrimental effect by bringing in players if they're not ready. You could have another Mipo de Beko on your hands. If we'd maybe, rather than throwing him in the deep end, if we'd done the Potts, you may well have seen a different player, rather than someone who's hauled off 15 minutes after coming on, that type of thing. I think there's definitely a need for at least one more centre half to come in. Yes, you can tinker stuff around as well. You could put, as a KWP, you could put him right right wing back and move Aaron into the right back position, which is okay. But come African nations, a couple of nations, you haven't got that option. So, or we send out Kalen and look at what else we can do within the academy. We've got Edris, we've got Ezra Mayers. I don't think Kalen's ready. In that respect, when people are going to say, well, how are the others ready? I just think, yes, good point, actually. Scrap that. Scrap that. But there is people there if need be. But for me, I think, to get the benefit the best out of Kalen, he needs to go out on loan. He simply does. He's been stuck within the academy setup for so long now. Not becoming institutionalized, but becoming part of the furniture. And actually, he needs to now go, and for that step up, needs to get minutes. Needs to get consistent minutes, not just be on the match day squad bench. Doesn't do nothing for him. Same as Lewis. As I said, I keep thinking Lewis needs to go out on loan, and he probably will do towards the end of the August, the transfer window. Let's talk about someone who is taking the opportunity within the academy. We spoke about Freddy Potts, who is not really an academy player now. Let's talk about Callum bloody Marshall. The right Callum we should be talking about, not Wilson, Marshall. He is exemplifying the point that was highlighted by Billy Reid, the West Ham assistant manager, who basically did an interview on the West Ham website saying that we'll give academy players opportunities, but it's up to them to take the opportunities. And for me, Callum is doing that. He's had a dodgy loan at West Brom. He had a good season at Huddersfield. He may well, if we bring him forwards, go out on loan to a championship club again this season. He might do. But for me, there is as I keep saying, there's a Danny Ings-shaped hole in that squad who I think Callum can come in and make that difference. I wouldn't mind seeing him when we do go for two up front, which we do occasionally, seeing him alongside a Fulkrug, two proper old school strikers, really. I always think Callum, I see Callum as like a Craig Bellamy type player. He's nippy, he's annoying, he'd piss me off if I was a defender. He's constantly nipping at you. And I thought he looked obviously more mobile than Fulkrug, but he is more mobile than Fulkrug. He's a different type of player completely. I think he's really taking his opportunity and potentially could be filling that berth. When Potter said that we don't necessarily need forwards, they're not a priority. Someone like Callum could be the reason why. You've got an issue. You've got you've got Fulkrug, Bowen potentially at push could play up there, and we could still be looking to bring back Antonio potentially. That deal is still on the table. He hasn't signed for anyone else, despite his agent saying that he had all these opportunities. Still not signed with anyone. You've got Callum. You even play Somerville when he's back in that sort of second striker role or second forward role if need be. Souček's, I won't say it, but Souček's played as a 10 before, so if you want to bring him on and then bring someone like Callum more advanced for the knockdowns, that's what sort of Fulkrug was doing. Sort of, that's how I could see it all working. But look, end of the day, he's taking opportunities. He's bagged himself a couple of goals in pre-season, and let's see what Sunday brings. You know what I mean? As I said, I'd like to see these incremental improvements, and on Sunday, I'd like to see. And we'll talk. Shall we talk about the shape? Let's talk about the shape. On Sunday, I would like to see that the defence that started the Man United game with the midfield that played yesterday. That in itself, for me, looks like the best of both worlds. Now, what was quite interesting, I thought, was particularly the first half shape. We seemed to be passing the ball a lot better. This has been more control of the game. Yes, they're playing Everton side who aren't playing well as either, and if ever it's not just us in terms of frustration with how team is playing, the team set up, the shape, lack of transfer activity and stuff like that. Go listen to Everton fans. I subscribe to Toffee TV. Obviously, we have Ped on the side quite often, and it's literally, if they change the accent, change the badge on their screen, it'll be exactly the same as they're talking about West Ham. Ironically, with David Boyes obviously in charge at Everton, as we well know. But in terms of the shape, I thought we looked a lot better that first half. We seemed to be a bit more fluid as well. Second half, I thought we dropped off, but from a defensive perspective, looked stronger. Well, first half we looked defensively a little bit naive, but I thought we played the ball better. It was more interesting to watch, and there was a bit of chatter in our WhatsApp group, but it looked like he was playing more of a sort of a 5-1-3-1 formation, which I think suits us better. If that's, or maybe a 3-1-5, it depends how high up the wing backs are. But in essence, 5 at the back, and then Freddy was playing that CDM role very well, I thought. And then with a 3, you can have Bowen, you can have Paqueta, you can have a Somerville, or Luis Guilherme, who I thought had a very good second half as well. Very good second half with a Füllkrug up front. That, and then you've got potentially the likes of Diouf bombing on. You got you got AWB bombing on as well. That's quite an overpowered formation. And then you've got the option to drop back to the 5 if you decide to want to play a little bit more sort of 5-3-2. There's different shapes. I think second half we played definitely more of a 5-3-2 setup. I just don't think it works as well as when we're playing on the front foot, unsurprisingly. But then the ability to adapt is there, but hopefully we adapt to the right places and the right times. And lastly, I want to talk about the goalkeeper situation. We've been linked to a lot of goalkeepers. We've been linked to a lot of sort of keepers who are ready, and then a lot of younger goalkeepers as well. I think we need to. In all honesty, I thought Areola had a shocker against Man United. I thought Fodrigo had a shocker against Everton yesterday. That is completely rehauling, in my opinion. Now, whether it's a case of getting one in now and one in January, possibly, or one for next year, but we definitely need a couple of new goalkeepers, I think, for sure. Again, exemplifies, I think we still need a decent, another all box-to-box midfielder. If the money was there, as I said, I'd go and get someone like Conor Gallagher from Atletico. Somebody who could just slot in now and play. Obviously, we spoke about Douglas Luiz, and now maybe we're going to hang on and wait to try and get a better deal out of Juventus, which to me suggests he's not a priority, because otherwise we would have snapped him up by now. You're seeing actually, people who are on our list or have been on our list. Tyler Morton, Lyon are getting very close to signing him for not a lot of money, it seems. So I don't understand that. Maybe there's a different price for in the Premier League to out the Premier League, like we do with Kudus. So I can't blame Liverpool having different prices for different clubs. Hayden Hackney as well looks like he's going to Ipswich for 20 million quid. I'd like to have had a go in for them, but then again, maybe it's not a priority for us. Maybe we've got bigger fish to fry. I don't know. And that's the thing, you don't know. And that's why I always say at the beginning of all my transfer rumour shows that just because we've been linked to them doesn't mean we're going to buy them. And as I said, we've been linked to 187 players so far this season, this pre-season. So we haven't inquired about 187 players. We probably I reckon we've done 5-10% of that, if that. So I'm when I see the likes of Lyon in advanced chat talks with Tyler Morton, I'm thinking, I missed out on that one. Now for that one, I think we probably are interested in him, and I imagine Liverpool have got a different price tag on his head for a side outside the Premier League. And there's probably a buyback clause in there and stuff like that as well, which they tend to do. We know that's the case because that's what they asked for Harvey Elliott. It's 40 million with a buyback or 50 without a buyback. So they're probably doing the same thing with Tyler. But that's what I think about that game. Let me know what you think. I thought, it was great. I've had loads of people like Gary and various others message me to say they went to the game, and brilliant. That's great. Guys like you who, we're getting a little bit of what you do every week in terms of getting up at silly o'clock or staying up to silly o'clock to watch games. And you do that week in, week out. It just gives me an appreciation of that, really, because you guys are really sort of putting the yards in all honesty. I think it'd be interesting to see by the time Sunday comes round whether we've got anyone new in. We're just over a week, 2 weeks, rather, just over 2 weeks until the first game of the season. And we've got Lille next week as well. So, for a lot of us, it'll be our first chances to see the likes of Diouf in the flesh. KWP, and maybe one or two more signings because we need them. And as I said, it's not just West Ham. There's a whole host of clubs fans out there who are in the same boat as we are. It really was. I mean, again, go back and watch the Toffee TV review of the game, and yeah, you get it sort of grounds you a little bit because it's literally like us. It would feel exactly the same in them. Yes, they bought a striker, but I didn't think Barry had a very good game. He wasn't getting anything. He wasn't getting like any chances really. So it's like, what can you do? You know. So, but anyway, take care. If you like what we do, don't forget to give it a like, comment, share. I'll be back later with news, some headlines, some rumours. It'll all be there. And stay dry. Stay dry. It looks like it's gonna be an absolute washout today. Hopefully not. And I'll see you guys later. Much love. Bye bye.